Hi, everyone, and welcome to Online Thriller Fest. I know that all of you were disappointed when Thriller Fest was canceled, as I was, but I'm very happy that ITW has found a way to bring at least some of the content online for us to enjoy and to learn from. One of the things that I particularly love about Thriller Fest is the opportunity to talk to publishing professionals, such as we have here, Dan Conaway and Mark Tavani. They're Thriller Fest regulars, and whenever I would attend Thriller Fest in person, I would always go to the panels that had agents and editors on it because I wanted to learn what was going on behind the scenes. So I'm very happy that I can be interviewing our two Thriller Fest regulars today for a discussion titled, You Have an Agent, What Comes Next? First, I thought I'd better introduce myself in case you don't know who I am. My name is Karen Dion, and I'm the author of two psychological suspense novels that are both published with G.P. Putnam Son. The Marsh King's Daughter, published in June of 2017, and my forthcoming novel, The Wicked Sister, is going to publish August 4 of this year. And so I'll introduce Dan. Dan Conaway is a literary agent at Writers House. He represents many best-selling, award-winning thriller authors, and I'll read some of their names here. Some of his clients are Megan Abbott, Grant Blackwood, Allison Brennan, Joseph Finder, Matthew Quirk, and M.J. Rose. Before he became a literary agent, Dan was an executive editor at both Putnam and HarperCollins. Mark Tavani is vice president and executive editor at G.P. Putnam Sons. Mark edits fiction and thrillers and nonfiction about subjects such as current affairs, history, sports, and science. He works with a great many well-known thriller authors, including C.J. Box, Clive Cussler, Jeffrey Deaver, Lisa Gardner, T. Jefferson Parker, Lisa Scottolini, and me. Hey, Mark. So I think it's safe to say that between Mark and Dan, we're looking at dozens of years of publishing experience. And again, we're really fortunate that they've agreed to share their insight into what happens after an author signs with a literary agent. And the reason we chose that topic is because so many aspiring authors are very focused, they're so focused on getting a literary agent and finding representation that they really know very little about what happens after they sign with an agent. So we're going to dive into this topic and get a little window into what the situation looks like from the agent and the editor's chairs. So Dan, we'll start with you. So we've got an aspiring author. He sends you, or she, her manuscript. You love it. You offer representation. The author accepts. Then what happens?
Yeah. So then what happens is Mark and I have parallel lives in this regard. Mine starts first. I do my deep dive editorially. So we're getting past the question of whether something appeals to one or not, and now we found the thing that does appeal to me. And obviously this is terribly, terribly subjective. So I like what I like, and you might not like what I like, and Mark might not like what I like, but I like it, so I'm going to take it on. And then what I'm going to do, partly because I used to have a job like Mark's, is I'm going to edit it as though I were Mark. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to work with the author to get it to the place where if I were publishing it, this is what I would be putting into production. So that process can be a long one. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it happens more quickly, but basically I feel like my job is to make sure that by the time we decide, me and the client decide, that the thing is ready to be submitted to Mark Tavani, let's say, right? We want to have thought through everything we can think of that Mark and other editors might trip over. We want to minimize the moments that we can visualize where the editor might read and then trip over something or say, oh, wait, that doesn't quite fit, or this doesn't follow, those sorts of things. These sorts of very subjective editorial judgments that each of us make, and each of us make in a different way. But that's the process that that I start on my end first, because I just need to, part of it is I need to be absolutely confident when I call Mark or the other editors that I'm dealing with to say, I've got this thing and it's the shit. I love it. It's really great. You're really gonna want to read it. I got to that's got to be true for me to really convince him of this. Mark's hearing from all the best agents in town, so he's got a big stack of submissions from other people, and part of my job is to try to convince him to prioritize mine over others, right? So if I really believe it, then maybe Mark will hear that in my voice and prioritize it. So that's part of it. And then so we go through whatever that is. That may be 6 months. I had a situation a few years ago. I took on a client. I knew I was taking her on within 25 pages of starting this manuscript. It just clicked for me, and it was 3 years before the manuscript was ready to submit. So anyway, so now I've got the manuscript ready to go, and now the next stage is to figure out who I'm going to be sending it to. I have to create the client and I will write a pitch letter together. We'll start identifying the editors that we think are most likely to respond to it, and then finally it goes out on submission. My process when I'm making a submission is I never want to send something blind, so I always put in a call to the editor, try to speak with them first. If we connect, then I might be able to hear something in their voice, or maybe they're going on leave and not going to be around for the next 3 weeks, whatever. I want to be sure that I'm sending it to the right person at the right time. Once I've heard that, once we've had that conversation, made that connection, then I hit send. I send the manuscript, in case of fiction, the full manuscript plus a pitch letter. And that goes out to maybe 20 different editors over the course of a submission, and now it's the ball's in their court while they're reading and deciding what they're going to do and how they're responding and all that kind of stuff. Is that far enough for now?
Yeah, I think so. That's excellent. Let's hand it off to Mark now. So you're sitting at your desk, you get Dan's email. Now what?
Yeah. So I mean, as Dan said, there's a lot of parallel here. And the first thing that I'm going to react to is going to be the pitch itself. Okay. So Dan's talking about how he plans the pitch out. I can sense when that's happening, right? There are times you get a submission that kind of feels not offhand, but it doesn't feel kind of curated, right? It doesn't feel like it's got this like investment behind it. That I can't help but hear that, right? Just like I can't help but hear true enthusiasm. When an agent calls me and says, look, whatever you're doing, stop for a second. I got to tell you about something, and here's what I love about it. And they start talking about it. You can tell when it's genuine, when they really mean it, when they're picking very specific things to praise. So that's the first thing I'm reacting to is, do I sense passion from the agent? If I do, especially if it's somebody I've worked with and I trust, that's going to get me to prioritize it, put it at the top of my list and really try to get right to it. And also helps me go into it optimistically, right? It's no secret, I think, that editors have to say no most of the time, right? So it's a nice feeling when you can start reading something and feeling this really feels like it could happen, right? Then the next thing, of course, that I'm reacting to is the read. Just like Dan went through this process of 25 pages in, he knew he was hooked by something. Same thing can happen for me or it won't. And it can be less than 25 pages. It could be just a few pages where the style just doesn't sit, right? Dan said how subjective it is. It is. If it doesn't click for me, then it doesn't kind of matter if I push my way through it. I'm probably not going to be the best editor for it. That voice on some level has got to work for me. It's got to appeal to me. And I have to be able to offer something to the author to make it even better, right? So that's there in the read. But as you get deeper into the read, then I think you're looking for a couple things. You're looking for a story that holds your attention, right? We all know how busy consumers are right now, how many media substitutes they have. So if I'm not hooked by it and it's my job to read it, can I really imagine that a whole lot of people out there in the real world are going to stay tuned in? Hard to think, right? So I want to stay tuned in, and I'd love to find something in the read that either surprises me or just really impresses me. It could be kind of classic, but perfectly done, or it could be something like, wow, I didn't see that coming. It could be a twist, could be a voice, could be a character. Any of those things can do it. So then, ideally, I think as an editor, you'd want to take some time and let the thing settle in and see how you feel about it. But usually you do not have that luxury. Usually, once you've finished, you got to get this thing moving in one direction or the other. You're either telling the agent, I'm sorry, it didn't work out, or you're trying to buy it. So if I'm trying to buy it, then I start a couple conversations. One conversation is with my team. Okay, this could be my editor-in-chief. could be my publicity director, could be my marketing director, could be somebody from sales, could be the publisher. Any of these people might be involved in the conversation once I've read. What I'm doing is now we're kind of passing the baton. There was an author who tried to sell Dan on the project. They got his attention. Then Dan turns to me and says, hey, I got this thing and I love it. Would you read it? Now it's my turn, okay? And I got to turn to my team and say, hey, I know you're all busy. I know you're reading other things, but I got this thing in. I love it, and I think it might go fast. Can you please read this, right? So that's my job. I have to kind of start crafting a narrative to get other people interested. But the other conversation that's going to start is with the agent. So if I love something, I want to be on the phone to Dan, or at least by email, but on the phone preferably. As he said, he likes to make a call. So do I if I love something. I want to be on the phone with Dan as fast as I can, because the truth is I can get edged out. I might love something, but if I don't call Dan and he gets 4 calls before mine, it doesn't help my case. Doesn't mean I'm out. It just means he's going to remember that first call, that first person who said, I couldn't agree with you more. So if I can be that person, I want to be that person. So I'm having 2 conversation kind of chains at once, which will eventually dovetail. And if things start to move in a positive direction, not only am I getting somewhere with the agent, but also my team sees what I see, then the next conversation I might have is probably going to be with the author. When you've got in a novel that you love, even if you love it like, 99%, there's still going to be something, right? I'm a big believer that if I'm going to offer on somebody's book, they deserve to know upfront what I think about it in detail, including what might be better, right? And it doesn't always click, right? In the same way that a voice doesn't always click for an editor. There have been times where I've had conversations with authors where I've said, I'm not sure about this, this, or this. And sometimes the author says, oh, I totally hear you. I was working on that, but I wasn't sure I got it right. And then I'm thinking, great. And even better, the author might say, what do you think about, as a solution? Ah, perfect, right? But I have had it happen where an author says, I don't think so. And that's fine. That's totally fine. Because now I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I know that my suggestions are probably not going to be helpful and they're not going to be receptive. And that's okay. Another editor is going to see it a different way, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, once we've had all of these things line up, my conversation with my team, my conversation with Dan, my conversation with the author, the next question becomes, how do I buy it? And that's the extended conversation between Dan and me, where we try to figure out, okay, I've got interest from 7 different publishers. I'm going to set this up to try to be advantageous to my author, as he should. And I've got to figure out how to track his rules and make the conversation open, get the information I need so I can get involved in the auction or try to preempt or whatever the situation demands, right? So that's the next part that we do together.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to hear, especially because you're my editor. It's like, for me, getting a little window into what happened when my agent sent the manuscript on submission. And just
well, Karen, can we ask you a question?
Sure.
So was yours handled by preempt, or was it an auction?
It was an auction.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
And my literary agent, Jeff Kleinman, to Mark's point about how fast things happen, he sent the manuscript to 36 editors on a Monday, and by Tuesday morning he had heard back from 29 of them. Mark's not smiling.
That's great.
So, but
yeah. And then we had our first preempt the next day, and it just went from there. And then the next week we had an auction. Yeah.
Right.
But you can imagine how for us that's a lot of pressure too, right? Like the editor, if I want to win this book, if I want to publish this book, I didn't know it was 29 people day one, but I knew it was a lot, right? I knew a lot of people were interested in it. So you got to figure out, well, how are you going to go into this game? And I will say that, so I had known Karen through Backspace, and that made a real difference, I think, for our conversation.
It did.
To be comfortable. But also, it was still important to me, even though we knew each other. And I knew you would get my edits down the line if we worked together. It still was important to me that we hashed that out at the outset, so you knew where I was coming from. And that way you'd know, like, our visions were aligned.
Yes, and from my standpoint, I ended up talking to 15 agents by phone, and you were the 14th agent. You mean
editor, right?
Editor, yes,
Right, yep.
editor. My agent set up calls every hour on the hour, so it was the 6th call at the end of a long day. my agent knew I favored you going in because of your reputation, because we have known each other professionally for a dozen years. But by then, of course, I talked to a lot of really excellent editors, and I don't hesitate to say your insights blew everybody out of the water. You were so smart and you so articulate, and you saw things in the novel that even I hadn't yet realized were there. So I agree. I feel like we really clicked in that call, and I'm, of course, thrilled that we're working together now. Yeah. So, okay, let's back up a little bit. So, Dan, maybe what's your act? What are you doing as you're getting a good reception from editors to this novel, and process of possibly setting up an auction?
Well, if I'm in a situation where I have 29 people calling, I'm lighting my cigar at 10 in the morning.
Some of them were those.
That's a pretty rare situation. But yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating because every single time you do this, the outcome is different, and every single time you do it, the outcome is a little different than you even anticipate. Like, there are times in which I'll have something, I'm sure it's going to go great guns. And sometimes it does. And sometimes what constitutes a great gun is a very different order, and comes to pass in a different way. Just never really know exactly how it's going to go. So, so part of, you send the submission out, and so now it's my turn, right? So I send the submission out to all the various editors, and invariably I'm going to hear back something from somebody within 24 hours. And the more of those things I hear back, the better the signal is. So sometimes if you send something out over a weekend, you start getting pings over the weekend. Maybe you might hear from a couple of people on Monday and Tuesday, that sort of thing. Again, some of it depends on how long the novel is. Some of it depends on the sort of that your situation, it's just like the dream from an agent's perspective. It's just fantastic, right? Because now everybody wants to talk to you. The other thing is that when you hear from people like this, when you get those first couple of calls, then you're in a position to call other people and say, listen, I know I'm an agent, you expect me to be full of shit here, but I just got to tell you, I'm getting some real heat on this. So if you haven't looked, go look. I'm doing you a favor, and this also, it helps propel the momentum. That sometimes if you don't have that, I'm not going to call somebody and tell them something's happening if it's not happening. That's just not how it works. So the energy that's out there becomes the energy that fuels the thing that I can use in an organic way. And yeah, so that's a big part of it is trying to read the room. You're trying to ultimately my job is to do one of two things, or both things ideally, is to maximize the amount of money that an author is going to be able to get for a project. That's one part. And the other part is to put that author with the kind of editor who is going to be able to look down the road that we can sort of see working together, not for one book, but for 3 books, 5 books, 12 books. That's the dream, right? So you have a partnership that everything sort of fits and just keeps going. That's really what you're looking for. So, I can't manipulate things. I can't make things happen. But when I'm getting certain signals, I can use those to kind of try to push the process forward. Now, sometimes what'll happen if I get 2 or 3 of those early responses, all that's going to happen is that I'm going to start calling people and letting them know. And Mark, tell me if you agree with this. If I'm doing that, generally it's for my best interest, but it's also, you also want to know that, right? You want to know that things are kicking up dust, right?
Yeah. There's a certain amount of pressure. I think part of what Dan's talking about is there's pressure on the editor to prioritize the different projects that are coming in, right? To get through them in the right order, the best order. But sometimes the fact that an agent is getting a lot of interest in a project becomes my reason to prioritize. If I'm not the first person to read it, I don't want to be the last. So Dan giving me that information is really helpful. I totally agree.
Yeah. So then, so under those circumstances where you've got something clearly happening, you've got a few people who have really, taken the bit, so to speak, then I can legitimately call people and say, okay, this is moving. you please, for your own sake and for my sake, let's get on this. A lot of what'll happen after that, sometimes you wind up with many, many people ready to come. Oftentimes what'll happen is it will accelerate the process by which people say no, right? So, if Mark knows that things are heating up here, and he's not going to know the specifics of who I'm hearing from, but he's going to know that there's certain energy, and then he digs into it quickly. He may get to that point quickly where he says, it's pretty good, I can see something, but it's not for me. So he's out now. Now, this process for Mark getting out was going to happen one way or another. It might have taken 3 weeks normally, and now it happened in 3 days or a week or something like this. One of the things that is interesting is that in the end, sometimes these dynamics do create more bidders, but more often what they do is they clear the field quickly. And that's really important for me, because I need to know who my real players are going to be. I need to know who in the end are the people that we can really start visualizing as our future partner, and so.
And Mark, if I could just ask you, so how is it for you as an editor if you invest all this time and energy in reading and assembling your team and getting a price for the book, and it goes to auction and you don't get it?
Yeah, it's exhausting, but it's never taken in the wrong spirit. Like the ones that are hard to take are when you don't really understand what drove the author's decision. Look, if there's a big gap in money, right, between what I'm offering and somebody else offering, we all understand that, right? That we get that. And if somebody had a really different vision for how or when to publish, I can get that too. The only ones that are difficult to swallow are the ones where you feel like you made a perfect pitch for what you wanted to do for the book. You felt like you connected with the author, and they chose somebody else for pretty much the same amount of money for a reason that you can't really figure. And the agent will sometimes know and be able to tell you, and sometimes they'll say, I don't know. They had a feeling. They had to choose between all these different people, and they chose that person. That can be hard. The other thing that can be hard for an editor is when you lose to an underbidder. It's a real, right. It's a wonderful feeling for an editor when you are the underbidder and you win a book, right? You've offered less money, probably not by a lot, because but you've offered less money and you've won it. That when you win it as an underbidder for an editor, it's just a wonderful feeling. You think, wow, we really must have connected. They must love how we talked about the book or what we promised them we would do. If you lose to an underbidder, it's a difficult feeling. So there is that.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't believe 20 minutes has gone by. That was supposed to be our whole time. And my Zoom, I get a notice saying the Zoom meeting's going to end in 10 minutes. So we really have to wrap this up. My last question that I wanted to ask each of you, and I think we've already gotten a sense of this. You're both very passionate about your work and what you do. So what is it that you particularly love about your job? What gets you up in the morning and going to work?
I'll go first. I guess for me, it is the possibility of discovery I mean, that's an initial thing. There are lots of other phases to it, but yeah, I think that any day you're reading something new could be the time when you find something you just fall in love with, and that's really exciting. So that's a big part of it for me. I think that the other thing, since time is short, I think that the other thing is that I think writers are pretty great people mostly. I mean, some of them are not, but mostly they are, and mostly they're really appreciative. And also, I think because they spend so much time alone in the basement, kind of like coronavirus now for all of us, I have a new sympathy for why so many authors are crazy. But, they really are appreciative, actually. I feel like the work that I do when I'm helping a client through one thing or another, I feel like I really get my props. I feel like people come back to me and say, I really appreciate this. So there's a sense of kinship and partnership that is part of what I really love.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's, I get to work with people all day long. So the relationship part of it is really important, but I think I always come back to the work, like the actual writing for what drives the passion. And the three things I kind of identify when I was just kind of thinking about it. One is something that really feels new, right? When an author is able to do something where you're like, wow, I've just never read it that way before, and it can stay with you for that reason, that's a great thing. when somebody does something that might be kind of classic, but they do it just right. It's, you know, and you're so impressed. And you're like, God, I just love to know how they think, how they plan this out, how they came up with the idea. But the other thing I would say is when a manuscript strikes a chord with you on some really fundamental level. Karen, when you and I spoke about The Marsh King's Daughter a long time ago, the main thing I told, like, for all the things I was impressed with and I thought could sell and this and that, it was a father-daughter story. And for me, that just, you know, that did it. That's what hooked me. So I always love to find a manuscript that in one way or another just kind of strikes a chord and really stays with me.
That's awesome. And gosh, guys, thank you both so much. I wish we had another hour that we could continue. And I'm sure that our listeners who watch this video are going to really appreciate all of your insights. So thank you for joining us, Mark, Dan, and everybody who's listening, and stay well and stay safe.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Thank you.